My partner lied about money for years, betrayal you can't imagine. I thought I was building a future with the man I loved. But for years, he was hiding the truth about money, debt, and lies that threatened to destroy everything. The perfect illusion. When I first met Daniel, I thought I had stumbled upon the kind of man people write about in novels. He was charming, attentive, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that made everyone around him feel safe. On our third date, he told me about his career in finance, how he was working his way up the ladder and planning to open his own investment firm someday. I was impressed, not just by his ambition, but by how effortlessly he spoke about stability, responsibility, and long-term goals. For someone like me, who had grown up in a family that constantly struggled with money, Daniel felt like a dream. He seemed solid, grounded, the kind of person who would never let life's storms knock him over. I believed him when he said he had everything under control. When we moved in together, everything looked perfect on the surface. Daniel paid the rent on time, covered utilities, and even surprised me with little gifts, flowers, takeout from my favorite restaurant, or once, a necklace that made my coworkers gasp when they saw it. "You're lucky," they said, and I believed them. But every once in a while, there were cracks. One night, about a year into our relationship, I noticed a stack of unopened envelopes shoved into the back of his desk drawer. I teased him about being disorganized, but he snatched them up quickly, mumbling something about junk mail. His hands trembled slightly, but I let it go. I told myself everyone had quirks. Another time, when we were out with friends, one of them joked about Daniel being tight with money. Daniel laughed too loudly, brushing it off, but his eyes flickered nervously in my direction. Again, I ignored it. After all, he was generous with me. But the biggest warning sign came when we started planning our wedding. We sat at the kitchen table one night, surrounded by magazines, spreadsheets, and scribbled notes. I suggested we create a joint account for expenses, just to keep everything simple. Daniel froze, his smile faltering for just a second. "Maybe later," he said quickly. "My accounts are complicated. It'll just be easier if I handle it for now." I hesitated, but he was so convincing, so reassuring. "Don't worry," he said, kissing my forehead. "I've got it covered. You don't need to stress about money. That's my job." And I let myself believe him. The wedding came and went, a blur of laughter, dancing, and promises whispered under fairy lights. Our honeymoon was perfect. 5 nights in a beachside villa, cocktails by the pool, and late-night talks about the future we would build. But reality has a way of creeping back in. A few months after the honeymoon, I noticed small inconsistencies. A bill that seemed higher than it should be. A phone call he took in the other room, his voice hushed and urgent. The way he tensed whenever I suggested we sit down and review our budget together. "Why don't you trust me?" he snapped one evening when I pushed too hard. "I'm taking care of us. Isn't that enough?" I backed off, ashamed for doubting him. After all, he was the one handling the finances. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. But deep down, a knot of unease began to grow. The truth began to unravel slowly, like threads slipping loose from a carefully woven sweater. One Saturday morning, I went to grab a sweater from Daniel's closet and found a crumpled bank statement tucked between his shirts. I don't know what made me open it. Curiosity, instinct, or the gnawing voice in the back of my mind that had been whispering for months. My breath caught as my eyes scanned the page. Overdraft fees, late payments, credit card balances that made my head spin. I sank to the floor, the paper shaking in my hands. When Daniel walked in and saw me, his face drained of color. For a moment, we just stared at each other in silence. Then he forced a smile, like a magician caught in the middle of a failed trick. "Let me explain," he said softly. But explanations wouldn't change what I had just seen. He hadn't been honest. Not about his savings. Not about his stability. And definitely not about the future we were supposed to be building together. That night, as I lay awake listening to his steady breathing beside me, I realized the truth. For years, Daniel had been lying. Every promise of security, every casual assurance, every time he told me not to worry, those were lies. And if money was just the surface, what else had he been hiding beneath? Part 2, Confrontation and Cracks. When I finally confronted Daniel, I expected excuses. Maybe a slip of the tongue, an apology wrapped in a promise that it would never happen again. What I didn't expect was the calmness in his voice, as if lying to me had become second nature. "You don't understand," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, his arms crossed defensively. I didn't want to worry you. You stress enough as it is. I was protecting you. Protecting me? I spat out the words. By lying? By letting me believe we were secure while you drowned in debt. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting anywhere but at me. It wasn't supposed to get this bad. I thought I could fix it before you found out. I slammed the bank statement onto the table. This isn't something you fix overnight. This is years of hiding, of pretending. How long were you planning to keep it from me? Until collectors showed up at our door. His silence was answer enough. The days that followed felt like living in a fog. Every time I looked at him, I saw a stranger. All the little memories replayed in my mind with new clarity. The unopened envelopes, the nervous laughter when friends teased him, the way he resisted joint accounts. It hadn't been quirks or coincidences. It had been deliberate deception. And the lies didn't stop at bills. As I dug deeper, I found credit cards I never knew existed, loans taken out without my knowledge, and even a second checking account. It was as though Daniel had built an entire hidden life. One where he was free to spend recklessly, borrow endlessly, and shield me from the truth. When I confronted him again, the mask cracked further. I just wanted to give you the life you deserved, he said, his voice breaking. The gifts, the dinners, the honeymoon, I couldn't afford them. But I couldn't stand the thought of you going without. So I borrowed. I thought I'd pay it back once I got ahead. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. You didn't give me the life I deserved. You gave me an illusion. And now the debt isn't just yours, it's ours. Do you understand that? Friends started to notice the tension. Claire pulled me aside after work one day, concern etched across her face. You've been so quiet lately. Is everything okay? I hesitated, embarrassed. Talking about money felt shameful enough. Admitting that my husband had lied about it for years felt humiliating. But the words tumbled out before I could stop them. He's been lying. About everything. We're drowning in debt, and I didn't even know. Claire's eyes widened. Oh my God, what are you going to do? That was the question I couldn't answer. At home, the fights grew louder, sharper. Every conversation turned into an argument. I was doing it for us, Daniel shouted one night. For us. I fired back. Or for you. Because I never asked for fancy gifts or expensive trips. All I wanted was honesty. And you couldn't even give me that. His shoulders slumped, defeat in his eyes. I was afraid. Afraid you'd leave me if you knew the truth. The irony cut deep. The very thing he feared had become the thing he'd created. The breaking point came when a debt collector called the apartment. I picked up the phone, expecting a telemarketer. Instead, a stern voice asked for Daniel, demanding repayment of thousands of dollars. When I hung up, my hands shook with fury. They're calling our home now, I said, my voice trembling. This isn't just your problem anymore. It's mine too. And I never agreed to this. Daniel buried his face in his hands, whispering, I'll fix it. I swear I'll fix it. But I no longer believed him. That night, I packed a bag and went to stay with Claire. I needed space, air, distance from the suffocating web of lies. Lying awake on her couch, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how many years of my life had been built on falsehoods. How much of our love had been real, and how much had been propped up by credit and secrets. Was the man I loved ever truly mine? Or had he been hiding behind a mask the entire time? The next morning, Daniel showed up at Claire's door. His eyes were red, his voice hoarse. I can't lose you, he said, his hands trembling. I'll show you everything. Every account, every debt. No more secrets. I studied him, torn between anger and love. Part of me wanted to slam the door. Another part wanted to believe him. But trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. Fine, I said finally, my voice cold. Show me. But if I find one more lie, Daniel, we're done. He nodded, tears streaking his face. You won't. Not anymore. And yet, deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the lies. It was only the beginning of uncovering just how deep the betrayal went. Part 3, The Weight of Truth. Daniel kept his promise. That evening, he laid everything out on the table, literally. Stacks of bills, loan agreements, credit card statements, all spread across our dining room like the pieces of a crime scene. I stared at the chaos of paper, my stomach churning. Numbers leapt off the pages. Balances in the tens of thousands. Minimum payments that had been ignored. Late fees that stacked like bricks on a wall I couldn't climb. This is all of it, Daniel whispered, his voice hollow. No more secrets. I picked up one of the statements, my hands trembling. You've been hiding this for years. He nodded, shame burning in his eyes. Since before we even met. The words landed like a punch. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. So from the very beginning, everything you told me about being responsible, stable, successful, it was all a lie? Daniel winced. It wasn't supposed to be like this. When we started dating, I thought I could handle it. I thought I'd pay it off, that you'd never need to know. But then life got harder, and I got in deeper. And the more I lied, the harder it became to tell the truth. I set the paper down, my hands cold. So every gift, every dinner, every vacation, were they all paid for with money we didn't have? He nodded silently. My mind replayed every moment of joy, now tainted with betrayal. The necklace I had cherished, the honeymoon I had adored. They weren't symbols of love, but monuments to debt. Over the next few days, we tried to create a plan. Daniel spoke of consolidation loans, budgeting, cutting expenses. He promised he'd get a second job, sell his car, do whatever it took. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the suffocating weight of it all. Every time I looked at him, I saw not the man I had fallen in love with, but the lies he had built around us. At night, I lay awake, listening to the ticking clock and wondering if trust could ever be repaired once it was shattered. Could love survive when it had been fed by deceit for so long? One evening, I met Claire at our favorite cafe. She listened quietly as I poured everything out, the debts, the lies, the endless apologies. What do you want? She asked gently. The question hit me harder than anything else. Because I didn't know. Part of me wanted to fight for what we had, to believe that Daniel could change. But another part of me, louder with each passing day, wanted freedom. I wanted honesty, I whispered. And I don't know if I'll ever have that with him again. Claire reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Then maybe the question isn't what you want from him. It's what you want for yourself. That night, I came home to find Daniel sitting in the living room, surrounded by more papers. He looked up, desperation etched into his face. I applied for a debt management program, he said quickly. They can help. It'll take years, but I'll fix it. I sank onto the couch across from him, exhaustion pulling at my bones. Daniel, it's not just about the money. Don't you see? It's about trust. About the years you spent lying to me, to us. How do I know you won't do it again? Tears welled in his eyes. Because I can't lose you. You're the only good thing I've ever had. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just don't give up on me. His words cut deep, tugging at the part of me that still loved him, that remembered the laughter, the warmth, the man I thought I knew. But love, I realized, wasn't enough. Not without truth. I spent the weekend at Claire's again, my mind a storm of memories and possibilities. In the quiet of her guest room, I wrote out a list. Stay, years of struggle, rebuilding trust, maybe healing, or maybe drowning together. Leave, heartbreak, loss, but freedom. A chance to start fresh, to rebuild my life on honesty instead of lies. By Sunday night, the decision crystallized. When I walked back into our apartment, Daniel looked up hopefully. Did you decide? I nodded slowly, my heart heavy. Yes. His face lit with fragile relief. You'll stay? Tears filled my eyes as I shook my head. No, Daniel. I can't. I've been living in your lies for years, and I refuse to spend the rest of my life buried in them. I deserve better. We both do. His face crumpled, the sound that escaped his lips somewhere between a sob and a plea. Please, don't do this. But I stood firm, my voice breaking but resolute. I loved you, but I can't love the lies anymore. Leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done. Packing my bags felt like packing away pieces of my own heart. But as I walked out the door for the last time, a strange calm washed over me. For the first time in years, I felt free. The road ahead was uncertain, and the pain was real. But so was the strength I had found in choosing myself. Daniel had lied about money for years, but I refused to let those lies define the rest of my life. Because in the end, trust is worth more than any fortune. And without it, no love can survive.